Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webcast. My name is Andrew Gaffney. I'm Editorial Director with Demand Gen Report. I'm really glad you could join us today. We recently wrapped up our annual Demand Gen benchmark study and always get some interesting trend data out of that. So in today's session, I'll be joined by John Daring from Demandbase, somebody we worked really closely with over the years to analyze some of that data and relate some of the key trends we're seeing and takeaways around it. Some of the themes that we'll definitely be hitting on today are awareness versus precision. We'll see that a lot more of the trends that we're seeing and analyzing from that data are around much more precision-based marketing, trends like ABM, segmentation, precision. So we're going to be looking at how marketers are rethinking some of the channels, the metrics, and tactics related to that, and how they can engage their accounts and roles at key buying stages. Quick housekeeping item. This session is being hosted by Demand Gen Report. We encourage all of you, if you're not already, to become a subscriber. You can take advantage of a complimentary subscription at demandgenreport.com. Also encourage you to check out our social media groups. We have a Demand Gen specialist on LinkedIn. Get some good conversation threads going around topics like we'll be discussing today. Plug for our upcoming event later on this month in Scottsdale. Our B2B Marketing Exchange is literally nearly sold out. We will give one pass away to a lucky winner that we'll draw from today's attendee base. If you haven't already, check out the agenda for that. And also we have a B2B experts group that we do as a community where we share some ongoing challenges and questions, get good feedback from our audience. So encourage you to check that out as well. Our session today is going to be more of a discussion, so I think we're really going to try to dig into the results, share some live takeaways of what we're seeing out in the market, also some best practices, what John's applying, what he's seeing applying across their customer base. If you have questions as we're discussing some specific areas, go ahead and type them into the Q&A tab. Also, you'll see some related resources. The research that we're talking about will be available, and you can also see monitor social media, share any tweets that you're seeing, liking about the data, or questions, we'll be monitoring that as well. And the frequently asked questions we get, yes, the session is being recorded. You'll get a chance to go back and review it or share it with your peers. So without further ado, I'm really glad to have John Daring join me. I've had the good fortune of working closely with John over the years. I think he's been one of the real visionaries around ABM, not only helping Demandbase in its product offerings around that, but also helping their customer base and applying best practices. Again, he's somebody we turn to quite frequently. Thanks for joining me today, John.
Glad to be here, Andrew. It's always a pleasure to see what marketers are reporting and how they're applying their marketing practices and discuss that with you. So I'm excited to go through this data. I think there's some really interesting insights in here.
Awesome, thanks. All right, let's kick it off. A couple of high-level things before we get into specific areas of the data. The good news, exciting for us, we ask about budgets. We really want to get sort of a sense of where things are heading for this year in the data. The good news for us, about 50% of the respondents said that their demand gen budgets for the year were increasing by 20% or greater. So I think it's somewhat renewed. Those are actually better percentages than we had seen last year. So I think there's somewhat renewed confidence, emphasis around acquisition at all stages of the buying journey. Also, increased trends we're seeing that marketing is becoming much more aligned in revenue creation. We see about 43% that are either saying that they are monitored, measured by marketing sourced revenue or either pipeline influenced. So, the old days of just being measured by MQLs or where we're seeing continually shift. So what we want to look at today is, with that greater emphasis, with that greater budget, what are the priorities, what are the expectations, and dig into maybe how you can apply some of those trends or think about them in your business. We'll start with what are the top priorities for demand gen in this year, and I think again this is becoming a more accentuated trend we're seeing over the years where in the early days of Demand Gen Report we started publishing it was very much about volume. Marketers would brag about how much they grew their database, that they're reaching 100,000 people. Over the past couple of years they've gotten much more deeply involved in revenue creation. They're really focused on, are they reaching the right people, are they engaging the right people? And I think that aligns to what we saw with the top priorities. So the top one was improving ability to measure and analyze marketing impact, and we'll talk more about that in some specific slides and findings here. Second was just improving sales and marketing alignment. To me, that's been an ongoing challenge. I think it's becoming more acute in some ways now that marketers are working in ABM, and I think the challenges related to that are changing. Also, the third was engaging the right stakeholders within target accounts, which, ABM is a huge priority. I think ABM is really influencing and becoming integrated into all of the marketing B2B marketers do. And then the final piece is, around that precision basis, really focusing on lead quality over quantity. So the old days of just volume marketing just be going away. Obviously, spray and pray is a thing of the past. So, John, at a high level, I wanted to get your perspective on, is this aligned with what you're seeing on a day-to-day basis, both in your world and what you're talking to in conversations with your customers?
Yeah, Andrew, I think it really is, and it's great to see these starting to come to the top of the priorities, because it means a lot of the work we've been doing to evangelize ABM is really starting to become foundational to what B2B marketers consider to be their practice. And I think obviously number 4, thinking about quality over quantity, as you talked about, that's a core focus, but being able to deliver on that, the 3 before are really key to that. So being able to measure and showcase that approach is actually making an impact for the business is key for marketers to continue to invest in that strategy. And whether that's ABM or just being able to really drill down and get to the more qualified leads for maybe a marketer that isn't as focused on ABM, that's a key component to showing their value. That sales and marketing alignment, I always talk about it's almost like a marriage, right? It's not a destination where you get to. It's an ongoing journey, and it's a relationship that continually has to be nurtured. So there's no quotient, there's no exact metric to showcasing that performance, other than to say the more effective it is, the better results you're seeing from marketing and sales and business growth. So I think a lot of marketers are trying to figure out how to quantify that, which is still, I think, a bit of a challenge. But knowing how to track it and how to nurture that relationship is really key to investing and growing that element of your marketing practice. And then again, ultimately making sure that you're getting to those right buyers is really important, and that's what leads to that quality over quantity. So it's great, again, to see all these priorities surfacing to the top, that marketers are really focusing on that. So I think we'll see as we get into more of this data, it really supports these trends and what marketers are looking to do in the coming year.
Yeah, I think to your point that there's really a connective sort of thread between all of these, so it's interesting to look at. So when I asked earlier a bit, it was, what's the primary metric that you're measured on? So, MQLs are still the top, but when you start to see some of the other, traction that's going on, pipeline influence is becoming much more common. Accounts engaged, we're seeing much more as a primary metric, and then marketing sourced revenue is really right up there. So, I think it was a few years ago where it was good news to us that, okay, well, they're at least being measured on metrics. So, if MQLs, it kind of was consistent with what SiriusDecision was talking about in the early days of their funnel. But, we're seeing, I think, kind of in a large, it affects by sort of where marketers are in their sophistication, but clearly moving towards revenue-based metrics. John, I wanted to get your quick perspective on this and see if it's, again, consistent with what you're seeing and where you see it heading, beyond this year.
Yeah, again, this supports that reality that marketers are starting to look at their impact on the business. And as we get deeper into the webinar today and talk about some of the different technologies and things like that, some of this data they can source through like a CRM system, for example. But measuring the impact and looking at how different, say, programs are running or different channels or things like that, I think are still, that's still some of the stuff we're evolving in the ABM world. So, when we look at what a marketer or a marketing department is primarily measured on, it's great to see these at the top. It's interesting to look at things like accounts engaged or web traffic being rated on there even, because as a marketing department, most B2B marketers probably aren't fully measured on how many accounts they can engage. That is one metric they monitor and look at, website traffic as well. So I think, there's still some headroom for growth in here, and, seeing that accounts engaged metric is jumping up over something like website traffic is an encouraging sign that at least they're looking at it through the right lens of, what's the real ultimate goal for measuring something like a top of funnel website. Are we getting the traffic there, but are we getting the right kinds of traffic, and are we getting them engaged? So it's great to see that marketers are really starting to look at things and measure it from the funnel. But even those that maybe aren't quite far down that line, their shift is starting to go towards the right types of visibility and the right types of engagement metrics.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we'll expect that kind of metric of accounts engaged only to grow in coming years based on what we're hearing in our conversations. So we know budgets are going up. We got a sense of where their priorities are, what we're trying to accomplish. Then we wanted to ask you, well, where are you planning to invest? What are some of the technologies that you're prioritizing? Not surprisingly, I think it's the third year in a row now, by far, ABM was the top priority. The other thing is, I think as marketing automation really, took hold over the past couple of years, that email became the predominant, email landing page became the predominant way to try to engage digitally, but we were seeing much more of a focus around multi-channel, and I know this is something we're going to dig into a little bit further, John. Still, surprisingly, marketing automation ranked as one of the top areas of investment. We feel like that in a lot of verticals that the adoption rates are already pretty high, so we're a little bit surprised to see that. Content performance and measurement, I think, are ongoing themes and trends. We've seen a lot of heavy investment in content marketing over the past couple of years, so now we I guess are not surprised to see that now they're really trying to evaluate and see what kind of ROI they're getting out of that, what kind of impact and intelligence they can grab out of that. And then another key area was around intent and signal data, and we do hear a lot of we've seen some good success stories around it. We've seen a lot of our attendees at our events and webinars asking a lot of questions about it. So, we're going to talk about all of these, John, at a specific level, so I won't ask you to dive in here. We'll go ahead and dive into each of one of them individually. So let me go first and sort of ask your perspective on ABM. Again, I mentioned it was by far the top area, top priority, and planned investment. 46% rated as their top planned area, and there's already been heavy investment. So I think that really speaks volumes. I want to get your perspective on that in terms of what that means from the continued investment around tech. Do you see any challenges or questions around, are they able to align what some of their business goals are with technology? And then just also any fundamental differences you're seeing between ABM priorities and broader demand gen in the past.
Yeah, so first and foremost, as a demand-based employee, I'm always excited to see that ABM Tech is at the top of that list. That bodes well for us. But, if we think about the previous slide and some of those, those top tech priorities, what we're really seeing there is that marketers are trying to say, we know we need to be focusing on the accounts that matter the most to our business, figuring out who those are and how to engage them, how to market to them. We have sets of systems we're using now, like marketing automation or CRM or things like that, and we're looking at investing ABM in ABM technology. How does all this stuff come together? And I think when we see multi-channel lead nurturing, that's kind of where that fits in. How do I connect all these technologies and create that holistic buyer experience across all the different places, all the different digital and live touch points that these prospects live. And so when we think about ABM technology, I think a lot of marketers are coming to the table and saying, okay, we know we need to add this to our tech stack. How does it fit in with what we have now and where we need to go? And it's that last point that's really important, because I think as they're investing in the technology, they need to make sure that technology is solving a business challenge. It's not just a shiny new thing that they should explore, but where are the challenges they're experiencing in their business, and how does that technology help support or solve that challenge? So it's really important, I think, that they're doing that, but it's also important to make sure that there's a culture or a strategy around ABM within the organization, because as we think about this measurement and attribution, if they're following the Pied Piper of ABM and saying, okay, we get the value, we need to do this, let's start investing in it, but their culture and their approach to measuring success hasn't caught up to that, there's going to be some discrepancies and some misalignment between how they can use the ABM technology that they're investing in and how they're measuring that today. So, for example, if they're thinking about investing in an account-based advertising tool, but they're still looking at things in terms of cost per acquisition or cost per lead or CPMs or click-through rates and things like that, that's not necessarily going to align with how they need to justify the value of an account-based advertising tool in their ABM strategy. So it's really key that they understand what the right metrics are to dive into and how to evaluate applying that technology to their marketing mix so that they can showcase its impact and justify that investment. Fortunately, many of the ABM tools that are out there are already kind of starting to focus on how to report against that data, so that they can enable their customers to jump in and start doing that immediately. So again, it's always great to see that these marketers are looking to invest in ABM technology. It's important that the vendors make sure that the vision can be fulfilled with the product, and that their customers can showcase that value as they're making those investments.
Yeah, you guys arguably have the most complete ABM suite offering available, but I still feel like there's some confusion around that marketers are hoping or looking for, like, oh, I'll just buy an ABM tool and I'll be done. You guys, can help people with, different elements of ABM all the way sort of through identifying who they are, making sure you sort of engage them on your website and you can attract advertising. But is there confusion around how to know what you need for ABM, and is there people that are trying to look for just sort of one thing and not understand the different components involved?
Yeah, there can be, and we come across that in the market a lot. I mean, ABM is such a hot term, kind of everybody likes to talk about it. Most B2B marketing technologies have some type of play with it these days. And so it's understanding, what that use case is for their product, right? So are you thinking about you just need to figure out firmographic data and things like that? Are you trying to look at, topics like coverage in accounts? Are you trying to activate your sales organization? Are you looking for signals? Are you thinking about display advertising? Are you thinking about website personalization? Are you thinking about how ABM is going to be incorporated into your marketing automation system, et cetera? So, again, it really ladders back to, what's that challenge that you're facing right now, and what tool can help you solve that? And then where do you think you want to go, and what tool, is either already has those solutions that will be available for you when you're ready to graduate to them, or, has them on their roadmap and things like that. So, yeah, I think a lot of marketers just kind of want to get it and, check the box and say, okay, we're doing ABM. But it's really important to make sure that they understand how they're using all those technologies together, and again, that it's, they can showcase that value and that it ladders up to the goals of the company. Because if we're kind of rogue doing our own thing and we're, not supporting the growth goals of the organization, or at least not aligned with those, it's going to be harder to make that case and to keep that synergy going within the company.
Okay, great. So one of the other areas, and we talked about this a little bit at the outset, was data and measurement are still key, I think becoming more key in the era of precision marketing. On the one side, we saw only 42% said they felt like they had good coverage, so there's clearly still a void or room for improvement there. And even of those 42, they said that they still have significant room to improve their they admit their contacts are either incomplete or inaccurate. So I think this is still an ongoing area for most people to say this is important. I've got to invest more in it. 28% said they were prioritizing data enrichment. So I want to get your perspective is this vital? Are these folks looking at the right area, and what are some of the trends you're seeing? How are companies unifying data across channels on the data side, and is data and coverage becoming even more critical in the ABM era?
Yeah, I would say that it absolutely is. And not that it ever wasn't. I think as a marketer, this is the least sexy part of the job, right? Making sure that we have coverage and data and the right kinds of data. It's not the fun part of creating visuals or audiences or the psychology of engagement or things like that. But it is foundational, right? So if you've defined a set of target accounts and you don't know how you can market to them, you don't know what kind of coverage you have in those accounts, what kind of people you have in your database to whom you can market, it's hard to measure whether you're going to really be able to get into that account. And so, it's an exercise we've done here. I think it's an exercise that is continuously ongoing because people these days switch jobs so much more frequently than they used to. Back in my early career, I used to work for a company, and I think our VP of sales had found a stat or came up with it or something that, on average, people leave jobs about every 18 months. There's been research, I think it was Gartner, that showed that CMOs, the average tenure was around 2 to 3 years, and things like that. So, if you're thinking about that and thinking about it in terms of coverage, you can expect that your buying team is gonna turn over on some type of cadence, and I'm sure that changes from industry to industry. But the idea there that you're never going to have complete and full coverage of any account in perpetuity. So it's a lesson and it's a process we have to continue to execute on a regular cadence. We went through a similar exercise a couple years back where we had some stunted quarters, and we were looking and trying to figure out what was going on. And one of the things we learned through that process was that we actually no longer had good coverage at all of our target accounts. So we kind of executed a manual white space process, pulled a bunch of stuff out of CRM, ran a bunch of Excel models on it, and figured out where we were missing, contacts and the right types of contacts, the right types of buyer roles in our target accounts, and then launched an initiative to go try to, acquire those people, engage them, get them into our marketable database. So it's really important that we know who we're marketing to, and it's also important that if we don't have that coverage in our marketing database, that we have other ways of going out and trying to influence those accounts. So that's that anonymous portion of it. If we have the ability to go and reach those people at that account because we know they're at that account, even if they're not in our marketing database, that's one of the approaches we can go to make sure our message is getting across to those buying teams, even if they're not marketable people, again, in our database. And part of being able to do that, I think, is it comes down to this data enrichment layer, which is, do we know everything we can know about that account? Do we have the right, profile data for it? We have the right, the firmographic, technographic, whatever types of data that we look at to help profile and find the right target accounts. But then are we bringing in, other types of data, signals, intent data, things like that can help us prioritize when and why we should communicate with that account, and what we should say to that account to give us the best chance of engaging them and getting them into sales' hands. So I think it's absolutely critical, and we've been hearing data marketers need to be data driven. A lot of that has been about our decision making and things like that. Now it's getting to the point of where we're actually using data to drive action and decisions, much like we see in the B2C world, or at least more effectively like what we see over there. There's a lot of ways where we can, if we have the coverage and we have the insights and the signals to utilize the effectiveness of our marketing, it skyrockets as a result of that. So again, it's not the sexy, fun part of marketing that we all enjoy when we make a cool video or a cool landing page or something like that, but even a cool content for a webinar. But it is the foundation and the baseline that we need in place in order to market effectively. And whether that's ABM or just traditional demand gen, these types of elements are foundational to any B2B marketing strategy.
Yeah, those are great examples. I think it's really good for other marketers to hear that from somebody like you, that coverage is not, like you said, it's not a sexy topic, and it's somewhat becomes like the dirty little secret of maybe if nobody notices, nobody will notice. But I think to hear that you guys realized it took the time to address it, and a larger company like yourself has been doing it for a while, I think it's a good eye opener, a good wake up call, and maybe just a reassurance that it's not just us. Everybody needs to go through it.
Yeah, and I think that's why you see, a lot of these data companies, really sticking around and doing well, because, keeping data quality as a vendor high is a difficult task. But there are some companies that are doing it and have been doing it well, and they've been around for a long time. So, I think if you're shooting in that kind of 90% accuracy range, you're doing really, really well. If you're talking to a vendor and they're in the 50-60% range, then you probably need to be comparing them to somebody else. So it's the game that's been going on since the beginning and will go on to the end. But yeah, I think it's something that we try not to look at, but we know we need to do. Yeah, absolutely.
So we're letting people see it visually. This just echoes some of the things we just touched on. You can see there that the top one, which is somewhat good news, bad news, that 40+% felt like they had good database coverage. At the same time, that they admit that a lot of their contacts are incomplete or inaccurate. Another big percentage that are currently reviewing their database and realize that they probably have work to do too. So just a chance to see that and echo it. That's part of the study as well. So another touched on earlier, John, I want to go a little bit deeper in, is this idea of data as a signal. So, intent data, signal data, I want to ask you to shed some more light on. We lump these together, but, in conversations you and I have had, you've shared with me really what some of the differences are between intent and signal data. But 34% of the people we surveyed are planning to invest in either or both of those to help inform their campaign strategies, to help identify who they should be targeting, who might be in market. I wanted to see if you could share specifically what are the most effective ways you're seeing companies utilize that kind of data, and are there any specific stages in ABM strategies or broader strategies that you're seeing really have the biggest impact?
Yeah, I'm actually doing a session at B2B Marketing Exchange at the end of the month on this, where we kind of talk about some of the ways that marketers are doing that and some of the results they're seeing. So I'll cover a little bit of that, but if you want to, more detail specifically on this, come join us at B2B Marketing Exchange in the session. I think it's a lunch and learn session. It'll be a 5-star intent-based lunch. But what it really breaks down to is, when you think about intent versus data signals, it's really about the timing and the type of information that you're getting through there. So one type of signal data can be, is someone visiting a website? Are they engaging with your marketing, specifically marketing automation, right? Are they opening emails or filling out forms or responding to social tweets or things like that? And that's all, first-party known data, right? If they're in my database, they're in marketing automation, I can track, I can use those signals to, influence a lead score, to alert sales, to put them into a nurture campaign, to, do whatever marketing action you need. There's also external signals that are coming in. So when you start to think about like predictive vendors, things like that, they're looking for signals like, are they hiring, and is that company hiring in this space, or did they write a blog post about this, or is the executive speaking at a conference on a specific topic? Did they just get funding? These types of signals that are great to know that there's a potential opportunity at the company, but doesn't necessarily guarantee they're researching solutions at that time, right? If they're writing a blog post about marketing automation, chances are they already have a marketing automation solution. It's same if they're talking about it at a trade show. Versus intent data, which really has those similar foundations, right? It's still looking at some of those signals, but it's really about what are these people investigating, what are they researching about online, and specifically off of your first-party properties, so not your website, not your marketing activities. What are they reading about online that you can use to understand and know when they're going to go into market? So, if a company is you're not currently selling to, you're not really marketing to, but they're, you can identify they're out there researching a competitor, right? It's probably a good time to start engaging that company and going after them. So when we think about the effective ways to use that, it's really about using it across the whole funnel. So how do I identify, the right accounts that are in market now? So again, they're researching a competitor. We currently haven't been going after them, but maybe, they fit our ideal customer profile. They're now researching a competitor. Maybe we need to make sure we're getting into that account. So we launch some ads to them and activate sales and maybe try to market to them, send some emails, or, push some valuable content or something like that. If we think about display advertising, there are now ways to target the buying team at your target accounts based upon their intent. So, knowing they're researching that competitor, I can now target the specific people who were researching that competitor and any other, relevant keywords to our business and what we offer. So I can make sure that my ads are hitting that buying team who's showing that intent. Likewise, if they start to show up to my website, I can use that same data to personalize the website, put the right offers in front of them so they're finding, the right information. And as we look back at almost every B2B buyer survey you guys have done, that's a really key element to how people make their purchasing process when they hit the website. Did it show relevant content that was valuable to them and made it easy for them to understand, what that vendor had to offer? So, we're connecting, choosing the right accounts to, driving awareness to the right people, to creating the right experience when they show up, even providing sales with intelligence. So, sending out signals to salespeople like, hey, they're on the website, or hey, that company is now researching these topics. it helps activate sales if marketing can't be quick enough to get in there and drive a hand raise. And then ultimately connecting that data to other systems, right? You can deliver the right type of email message or put the right types of people into nurturers or score them properly based upon that intent data as well. So, when we can connect that data across the entire funnel and our marketing mix, it becomes far more powerful for us to utilize and to really start to put into action. And I think a lot of marketers, or at least a third of what we're seeing here, are looking to invest in this because they understand that. I think to a lot of marketers, that the white space of that number is that they get the concept, but they don't really, they haven't figured out how they're going to incorporate it into what they're doing today. So, not to say you need to figure out how to use these signals across your entire funnel. You might start at just the top, but using them to find the right accounts and then continue launching, your programs to those accounts based upon that prioritization. So, you can kind of start small and then grow into these more kind of holistic, full funnel experiences as you go. And then, maybe even use some of that stuff to change the experience across, the funnel or things like that. So, that customer or that prospect has been engaging a competitor, and then you get into a sales cycle, and then you start seeing them researching a different competitor, right? Well, the sales rep now can adjust their approach and say, instead of trying to position against competitor 1, they're now going to start positioning against competitor 2 as well. Because even if that prospect hasn't knowingly said that or expressed that to the sales rep, they can see the intent data that's being surfaced there, so they know that that's of interest to them. So there are a lot of different ways it can be used across the funnel. Likewise, if you're thinking about renewal cycles, when your customers are starting to review competitors, that's a good signal for the account manager to go in and position against that, that competitor, or maybe even try to cross-sell, upsell products if it's not an apples-to-apples comparison. So a lot of different use cases there. I think what's really important is that marketers are really trying to figure out how to utilize this data and improve the effectiveness of their marketing.
Awesome. Yeah, that's great stuff. Thanks for diving into that a bit. So I want to go back. We saw, the priorities part of the discussion with, measurement and attribution was a top priority. 47% of the folks we surveyed said that they're actively measuring campaign attribution and influence, which is good news. 42% planning to measure within the next 12 months. So this has been a priority, but yet I know in all my conversations with marketers, it's still a bit of a struggle. I wanted to get your perspective, John, on how metrics are changing given the increased targeting and emphasis on things like ABM, and are there different challenges you're seeing with attribution in ABM models?
Yes, I think this is a tricky one for marketers because there's kind of two different tiers of measurement and attribution. When we talk about ABM in those deep funnel metrics, like what we saw at the top of the webinar, looking at like MQLs or SQLs or marketing source revenue or pipeline generation, things like that. In a CRM system, that's fairly simple to measure, and it can be tied back to ABM technologies to be able to see it from an audience perspective or something like that, or through an A/B test. And that number makes it very easy to correlate or to associate marketing activity to business impact, growth, revenue, bookings, those types of things. But we also learn about attribution from a channel perspective. So if I'm promoting a webinar, what channels are driving people to register, and which channels are driving the right people to register? So with those two different layers, we have to understand, what we want to be reporting and looking at. So one of the challenges with applying that channel-based attribution measurement approach to a funnel metric, say, you're going to host a webinar and you're going to use a multi-touch attribution model to measure performance in, say, pipeline, for example. One of the challenges there is that the multi-touch doesn't purely keep all of the attribution with that webinar. So, for example, someone might come in, you might promote your webinar, someone from a target account comes in, they register, they show up, or they don't for that matter, a salesperson follows up and generates a pipeline opportunity. Well, that first and pipeline, and say it's a 4-point custom model. So you have first touch, opportunity generation, or first touch, last touch, opportunity generation, and close one. So that first touch, last touch, and opportunity generation are all with that webinar. Now they go through a sales cycle and they close one, but in the middle of that, they signed up for a workshop. Well, at Close One, that workshop was the last touch point, and it's going to take a little bit of that attribution away. It's going to take, if it's an even model, 25%. So you were at one opportunity from your webinar, but after the deal closes, it takes 25% of that away, so you're now at 0.75%. So you can imagine that gets really complicated to forecast the number of opportunities you need to generate from your marketing campaigns. It also can get tricky when you're talking about sales and marketing alignment, because if you go to your sales team and say, we're 6 out of 10 opportunities, or 6 out of 10 on the way to our goal, 60% of the way to our goal for opportunities for this webinar, and then next week you come back and report and say, now we're 5.75% of, or 5.75 opportunities out of 10 on the way to our goal. That gets really confusing. Why is it going up? Why is it going down? Why is it a fractional? How do you have a fractional opportunity? It's confusing for sales and hard to drive sales and marketing alignment when you're looking at this fractional score, and salespeople see an opportunity is 1. It can't be a fraction. So we have to make sure that when we're looking at the differences between direct measurement and higher level attribution, that we're looking at it from the right lens so that we can report the right numbers. There's also another perspective which thinks about if you're in a model where you have to influence sales, that's even different. That's where how many of our marketing opportunities have influenced the deals that are there, and what portion of revenue or bookings for the company have we influenced. That's where those more rich attribution models can come into play and be very valuable. So it kind of depends on what you're measuring within your business, what the strategy is for measurement and growth and tracking that, and where you want to go in order to figure out which is the right for you, the right approach for you, and how you should be applying each to your business and to your strategy and to your marketing objectives.
Yeah, that's great points, great insights. I appreciate you going so deep into that as well. I think, when we use the chart there again, 90% you're either planning or already prioritizing it. I think it's at different levels and different ways of measuring those, so I'm glad you went into such detail on that. Switch to one other element that we talked about where there's still a lot of interest priority around marketing automation. And again, my perspective, I know like the high-tech vertical adoption rates, should already be high. I'm curious, John, your perspective with 37% saying they're planning to test or deploy marketing automation in 2019. Do you think this could be a replacement switch kind of wave, or do you think it's related to more emphasis around that multi-channel thing that we talked about earlier? I'm just curious, especially with ABM becoming as pervasive as it is, or if you're seeing sort of a different role or different area of interest around marketing automation.
Yeah, I think those are kind of the two levels I'm seeing in the market today. Either there's a switch taking place, and they're looking at their different, their current provider and looking at new options as they're thinking about their ABM strategy and how how the marketing automation technology works with an ABM technology or something of that nature. So I think the ones where we're seeing the switches are actually kind of saying, okay, well, we want to go into this world. The provider we're using today isn't necessarily capable of delivering on this vision. What are our other options out there? I'm also seeing another trend that's come up a little bit more recently in the last couple of weeks, where I've been talking to companies that are really just adopting marketing automation for the first time. So, as you said, Andrew, in the tech world, almost every tech company has a marketing automation system. But there are a lot of larger enterprise companies that either a business unit doesn't, or the company as a whole has really gotten by without having to think about digital transformation and digital marketing from that perspective. So a lot of times I'm actually seeing some bigger companies that are coming to the table and saying, okay, we need to do this. Some of these even adopting Salesforce and CRM for the first time. It makes me wonder what they've been doing. Maybe they're running on an old legacy like Siebel system or something like that. But coming to the table and adopting a CRM for the first time and a marketing automation and kind of rolling all that out, I think is a signal that a lot of these companies are becoming more digitally savvy and thinking about doing that. And lucky for them is they're able to kind of leapfrog some of the learnings that have come out of the last 10 to 15 years of marketing automation development and kind of get to the end game right now. But I think the reason they're able to do that is because they are able to look at this multi-channel approach and think about, okay, if I need to create an experience for my target accounts, and it has to be across every digital touch point, how do I scale that out? How do I make sure that we're investing in the right areas, that we're making sure that we're targeting the right companies and the right people at those companies, and that we're delivering that consistent experience across every digital touch point. So I think that's why they're looking for systems that integrate with each other and allow them to harness, some of that intent data, for example, across all of those platforms, so that they can jump in there and know that, if their advertising is showing a message to an account and their website is personalizing to that same message, that their email marketing can be doing the same, and that they can be prioritizing those MQLs or SQLs to their salespeople based upon that intelligence and their interactions. So I think as ABM continues to mature, we're going to see more and more of this stuff in marketing automation, and in hopefully even some of these systems starting to refine the way they're built and use cases to be more account-centric. They'll probably do that through a lot of partnerships and integrations, but I think we're off to a good start. We've been doing some work with our marketing automation system and empowering intent, and we've been seeing some great results in terms of engagement and how putting the right message in front of the right account and the right people at the right time is really making an impact in terms of email performance. So we're seeing it. Our customers are getting really excited about doing it and wanting to jump in feet first. So as I said, I've been having a lot of conversations about this recently. I spend probably 20 to 30% of my work life addressing this with marketers in the market. So it is kind of I like that it is called 2.0, because it is kind of a resurgence of marketing automation around the ABM or the account-centric focus. And I think, again, a lot of companies, either they're just, kind of late to the digital game and just getting there, or, they're really looking to optimize and find the right vendor for them.
Okay, great. All right, the last thing I wanted to ask you to speak on was around what tactics and channels demand gen marketers are prioritizing. I've heard you speak on this before, so let me share a little bit of the stats we saw there and get your perspective. When we have been most effective for you in driving early stage engagement, you see email, web. It was the first time we asked about in-person events, and I think we've seen a resurgence there, specifically with ABM, and a lot more focus on field marketing and getting face-to-face. But I wanted to see if you could share your perspective. Website search are still really, rank really high in terms of the early stage. Email. When we talk about it at the top of the session about, balancing precision and awareness, can you talk about what you're seeing there from a channel perspective?
Yeah, it's interesting. We did a bunch of testing in this area over the summer, and I think we've reported some of those results back with you guys before. But, this doesn't, and I'm trying to think which report it was that you guys put out, where some of this data looked very similar. I think it was maybe the 2018 B2B buyer survey or one of those. But, I think what's really interesting here is for the majority of these, maybe in-person events and trade shows is the outlier, but for the majority of these are channels where there's already some level of awareness or at least interest in solving a pain point, right? So if you can use email to engage people, they're already in your email database. They've already come to you or been exposed to your brand at some level. Same as your website, right? Like, people don't randomly come across a company's website and say, what's this? Same as search, right? They're either going in to find you, or they're going in to try to solve a problem and look for some information on the web about it. Social, even the same, right? If they're going to follow your social handle, they're coming to you already. Trade shows, the outlier. Maybe they're at a trade show at a certain topic, and they kind of go around all the booths and things like that. But typically, they already have a pain point that they're looking to solve, which is why they're probably checking out your booth, unless they're just coming by and kind of doing their rounds to get their tchotchkes or something like that, get all their free socks. And so it's interesting that we see this, and I think these are channels that marketers are already really familiar with, and it's their go-to stuff. But what it doesn't address is that ability to generate awareness within an account that isn't already looking for you, or maybe isn't researching their problem just yet. And channels like display advertising and specifically account-based advertising really help you be proactive and make sure that that message is getting out to those accounts. So you don't have to wait for them to come to you. You can make sure you're driving awareness with them. But it's important in thinking about that account-based advertising is the choice for B2B marketers, because that's where the precision element comes in, right? If you're using a Google display network, you can get tons of scale, tons of volume, and tons of clicks. But if it's all unqualified, your ability to actually drive performance in that channel is pretty low, which I would assume is why we don't see anything like that on here, because most marketers are more familiar with those types of things or that type of channel in terms of display, and it just hasn't been a high-performing channel for them. So, it's interesting to see this. I'll be keeping an eye out over the next kind of couple iterations over the next couple of years to see if we start to see this shift as we have the metrics portion. But again, I think it's really interesting to see this, that most marketers are still kind of turning to these same channels.
And then, the next version of that one, we looked at early stage with that, but then later when you look at drive conversions, how does that change? You see things like product demos and phone come in more, but still email being the top and still website being a big priority there. Obviously, website is, making that website experience more relevant has been a critical area that you guys have focused on. Have you seen that, reach a maturity level where it's starting to see more payoffs and people are making that part of an integrated strategy? Yeah,
absolutely. And, these don't surprise me at all, right? So when we're talking about, the previous slide, driving awareness and making sure that you can get them to you versus once they're already coming to you, what's effective, this makes tons of sense. Product demos are great, right? Because they want to see your product, right? And that's an expression of sales interest. Phone, I think, is really important, and especially in today's digital world with social media and email and all those types of things. It's much easier to sit behind that technology and fire off a message and say that you've done everything you can to reach out to that prospect. We encourage our reps to be on the phone, and in fact, going back to the coverage and the data stuff, part of that is to fuel the beginning of every quarter something we call Shark Week, which is an aggressive kind of call blitz week where all of the reps hit the phones and things like that to try to help assist in drumming up pipeline for the quarter and kind of get it off to a good start. So I think phone is a really important one. Email is great for driving that engagement to continue to kind of pull in those people in your database and put content in front of them that they're going to find valuable and help them be better marketers. And certainly people coming by the trade shows, right? They want to learn more about your solutions and things like that. That's one of the reasons they're at these trade shows, and that kind of aligns with product demos a little bit. And certainly the website, again, whether we're talking about the numbers from the B2B buyer survey or just in general about how the website is your digital storefront, right? It is the place people come to learn about what you have to offer. So we need to make sure they have the best experience possible, and we can do that with using intelligence, using intent, personalizing it, and helping to create that consistent experience across the buyer's journey. So I think all of these are critical elements, and I think when we talk about a marketing mix, there's no silver bullet at all. It's really about how we put all of these together to create that experience for our target accounts and for our audience, for our market. So, again, none of these surprise me, and in fact, I'm really glad to see phone listed on there. I think it's something that we can see more of these days.
Awesome. So I've hogged a lot of the time here just kind of conversing through with you on some of the findings, but I did want to get to, we've got a bunch of questions come in, so I'll switch gears to that. Remind everybody, type any questions you had. We'll try to get through as many as we can. So, John, we've discussed a lot about ABM. We've got a few questions come in about that specifically. Ray said that they've kind of dabbled in ABM over past years, but they're really trying to prioritize it this year. So he's asking, where you suggest he start from a technology standpoint, and any direction you have about how to budget for it.
Sure, those are both great questions that we hear a lot. I think first and foremost, before you get to technology, I've mentioned this earlier, but there's that culture, or there's that agreed upon strategy alignment that has to be in place at the organization, or at least within the players within the organization, to make sure that you can apply technology to improve your marketing practice. But, assuming that you have that foundation level set and you're working on that, the first place to really start about is making sure you have the best target account list and the intelligence to do that. So, when you're thinking about going after a list, are you trying to identify net new accounts that you didn't know about? Are you in more of a strategic account scenario where you need to prioritize and rank and identify timing, the best time to go after those accounts? So I think that's kind of a first layer of technology that you want to build in there. I would say the second is the ability to measure the performance of everything you do in terms of marketing. So that's obviously reflected in the results that we're seeing in this report. But the ability to go in and say, okay, so if I'm going to apply some treatments, I'm going to go after some different segments, and I want to look and see how those compare. That's going to help justify the investment in the in list building and prioritization, as well as the ABM strategy as a whole, because you can showcase that, hey, we can, through this approach and going after the right accounts at the right time, we can increase our pipeline generation rates by 25%, or we can increase our bookings per deal by 15%, or things like that. All things that extrapolated can build into the model and show how marketing is delivering impact for the business. Once those are in place, then I think you start moving into the execution of channels. So whether it's advertising or personalization on the website, or integrating that data to other systems so you can utilize it across web analytics, or marketing automation, or content syndication, or any of those types of things. You kind of want to crawl, walk, run, and build into it, and not try to take on the whole thing at once. So starting with the list and getting justification around that is usually a really good first step.
Okay, awesome. We had a question from Adam. You talked about coverage data. He was asking if there's any specific metrics there, or any other strategy you'd recommend to improve coverage. Yeah,
so I think there's several different layers of what you want to be looking at in terms of coverage. The first layer is where do you have white space in the accounts you want to go after, right? So if you have 10 different buying titles in an organization, which ones are you missing at your target accounts? Second is then thinking about once you have those, what information do you have for those people? Right? If phone's going to be important, do you have direct dials for those people? If you segment accounts by regions or locations, geographies, do you have the intelligence to know not only where the account is, but where the people at the account are located? Not every employee is at HQ. Some are remote, things like that. So if you want to promote, an event, and the company's in Seattle, but the and the event's in LA, but the person's in LA, you want to make sure that you can correlate that data and get that right invite to that person. So those are key elements. I think also looking at your coverage in terms of if you think about it, I think it's CEB used to say that was it 6.8 or 6.9 average is the size of the average buying team at a company. So if you look at your target account list as a whole, how do you stack up against that number? Are you in that average zone? Are you below it? That gives you some insights on some things you need to focus on. So, the way I did it, I pulled it all out into Excel, and I had, columns of accounts, and then I had my buyer titles at the top, and I ran some formulas to look up all the titles in a different spreadsheet, and then designate how many of those I had at the account. So that way I can calculate, my average buying team size per account, as well as see the white space and gaps of the types of titles I'm missing, which makes it easier for me to go out and try to acquire those titles. So I think it's that coverage, that white space, it's the quality of the data you have in there in terms of being able to execute and do outreach, again, like direct dials and things like that. And then it's knowing where you need to pick up and augment to make sure that you have that full coverage and complete picture of the buying teams at your target accounts.
Okay, great. We've got a bunch more questions. I'm thinking I'm only going to get to one more because we're getting to the top of the hour. If we don't get to your question, I'll share with John and ask him to follow up with some of you directly. So final question from Kristen is about just sort of content and campaigns. She's asking how you differentiate them to make them more effective for either ABM or more segmented lists. Any broad ideas you could share there, John?
Yeah, I think when we talk about a content strategy, the first step is always just to do an inventory of what you have today, and think about where each of those pieces fits into its intended use or stage of a journey or of a funnel or something like that. Then it's from there you can identify where you have gaps in terms of topics as well as different stages of the funnel, so that you can start developing content to fill that in. Kind of make sure you have holistic all the content that you need in order to create that experience and that buyer's journey and fulfill the expectations of your prospects. From there, then it's really about measuring the impact and the effectiveness of that content. So, content can be a hard one to measure its impact, especially in a complex B2B sales cycle, because there are so many different touch points, and that content piece may not be the last touch before an opportunity or something like that, but it might be highly consumed up in the funnel. So, looking at that attribution and measurement, that marketing influence, if you can showcase that the content is influencing a large percentage of your deals, then you have quality content there and it is being consumed, and you don't have to necessarily correlate a pipeline number to that piece of content. You can showcase it through a different perspective. Likewise, there are a lot of tools out there now where you can actually measure how the content is being engaged and use that intelligence to drive action. So, there are a couple, we've used or experimented with, like Path Factory and Uberflip and things like that out in the market, where people are spending time consuming the content, and you can turn those into signals that you pass over to marketing automation. So, increase their score, send an alert to a salesperson, prioritize people at that account into a nurture campaign, things like that. And that helps you understand, not only whether your content is being consumed or not, but how it's impacting the performance of your funnel-based program. So, if you're seeing your conversion from MQL to SQL go up because you're putting people into sales' hands when they're consuming the content, and the salespeople can follow up on the phone quicker because they have the data they need to call on it. Then you can see that measuring that content is actually making an impact on your funnel metrics. And not only have you influenced 70% of the funnel with your content, you can also show that by measuring the engagement of that content, you're actually able to improve the funnel metrics at the same time. So I think it's first and foremost similar to the coverage idea. It's about coverage and content, and then measuring how that content is impacting the funnel is ultimately where we want to go.
All right, that's great. So again, a couple of questions we won't get to, but I'll forward those on to John. John, thanks for taking all those. Thanks for all the great insights and sharing and analyzing this data with me. I think it's been a great conversation.
Always a pleasure, Andrew.
All right, so I'll remind everybody, since we'll get a link to go back and review this and share it with their peers, we'll also get the full report on the Demand Gen benchmark study that we've been referencing. So I want to thank John again. Thank you all for tuning in, and one lucky winner from today will be getting a pass to our B2B Marketing Exchange. Hopefully some of you others are registered to attend, and we will see you out there. Have a great day, everybody. Take care.